announces a budget with a deficit of $139 billion for the next fiscal year. A range of relief measures, including a $10,000 cash payout for Hong Kong permanent residents aged 18 or above. And a concessionary low-interest loan with 100% government guarantee for enterprises. Good evening, everyone. Financial Secretary Paul Chan delivered his budget speech at the Legislative Council this morning. He announced a basket of relief measures amid the epidemic, including a cash handout for all adult permanent residents. The relief package is expected to cost the city $120 billion, which means the next year's financial year's deficit is expected to reach $139.1 billion. With that said, the deficit for the current fiscal year is estimated at $37.8 billion, which is the first deficit in 15 years. Our Caleb Lowe will begin our coverage.
This morning, Financial Secretary Paul Chan promised a cash handout of $10,000 to Hong Kong permanent residents aged 18 or above. This afternoon, he asked them to spend the money.
We want to revive our economy. We want to stimulate consumption. It is important for us to be able to get this money into the hands of our people in summer, when the current epidemic disease is over. We are quite confident that we will be able to start payment in summer.
Here are the details of the cash handout. Government sources say any permanent resident aged 18 or above on or before March 31st next year will be eligible to apply, including those who have emigrated to other countries. The money will be dispersed through bank transfers or by check. Those eligible are encouraged to submit their applications online, but paper application forms will also be accepted. The government has yet to release a timetable for the application process, but the deadline for application has been set for December 31st, 2021. Further details will be released once the Legislative Council has approved funding for the cash payout. Caleb Lowe, TVB News.
The budget also includes a range of measures such as salaries and profits tax reductions to alleviate the financial burden faced by citizens and businesses. Haley Joe with the details.
Some relief measures are targeted at low-income households, students, and small businesses amid the current economic downturn. The government will reduce salaries tax and tax under personal assessment for the 2019-20 assessment year by 100%, subject to a ceiling of $20,000. That's up from a 75% cut last year. Rates for residential properties will be waived for 4 quarters, subject to a ceiling of $1,500 per quarter for each property. The government will pay 1 month's rent for low-income tenants living in public rental units, as well as the examination fees for school candidates sitting next year's Diploma of Secondary Education examination. Altogether, these measures will reduce the government's tax revenue by $34 billion. For businesses, profits tax for the year of assessment 2019-20 will be reduced by 100%, with the cuts capped at $20,000. Rates for non-domestic properties will be waived for 4 quarters, subject to a ceiling of $5,000 per quarter in the first 2 quarters and $1,500 per quarter in the remaining 2 quarters. The government will waive the business registration fees and provide a subsidy to non-domestic household accounts for 4 months to cover part of their electrical charges as well as part of their water and sewage bills. These measures will cost the government more than $8 billion. The government today also introduced a $20 billion scheme to offer low-interest loans to small and medium-sized enterprises in all sectors. This loan scheme, with 100% government guarantee, aims to prevent companies from laying off their staff or winding up. SMEs that had been operating for at least 3 months before the end of last year and have suffered at least a 30% drop in sales revenue in any month since the current month, compared with the monthly average of any quarter last year, can apply. Each company can get a loan up to the total amount of the wages and rents that is paid over a 6-month period. The loan will be capped at $2 million and the company should pay back in 3 years. The loan scheme will be open for application for 6 months once it is launched. Haley Zhou, TVB News.
Meanwhile, the finance chief earmarked $120 billion for relief measures, despite expecting the city's fiscal deficit next year to hit a record high $139 billion. Sharon Tang has that story.
The $120 billion is twice the amount involved in Financial Secretary Paul Chan's previous budget. He noted the $139.1 billion deficit is an all-time high, accounting for 4.8% of the GDP. The last record dates back to 2001 to 2002, when it was $63.3 billion. But the finance chief noted this year's relief measures are only one-off, and he's confident it will not cause too much burden to the fiscal reserve.
Although in the coming few years, we are seeing over 50 billion annually in the operating account in terms of deficit, but on a consolidated basis, it is in the order of about 10 billion. That reflected, if we take into consideration that figure, the fiscal reserve of the government towards the end of 2024-25 would still be in the order of about 900 billion, which is about 15 months government expenditure. But at this level, I still maintain the view that the fiscal reserve at this stage is safe.
An analyst offered his take on what authorities should do to balance its checkbook.
If the government control the expense of the government in the coming few years, I don't think we will have a very long-term structural deficit. So the main point is the government also needs to find some way to generate some income. For example, the government can increase the rate for stamp duty.
Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Well, the budget is also setting aside funds to boost local healthcare and employment. Kana Chu has more.
In the upcoming year, the government will continue to boost its recurrent funding for the hospital authority by $3 billion. It will also offer another $600 million to increase manpower and enhance existing services. More hospital beds and facilities are being arranged under the second 10-year hospital development plan as well to meet the projected demand up to 2036. In terms of primary health care, the government plans to set up district health centers in 6 districts over the next 2 years, with $650 million earmarked for that purpose. That's on top of one that was set up in Kwai Tsing district last year. For the some 11 districts where health centers are not yet available, a $600 million subsidy will go to the setting up of interim facilities run by non-governmental organizations. The city may also expect its first Chinese medicine hospital soon, as the Food and Health Bureau continues to search for an operator by open tender. Another tender process will be launched for the construction of the facility later this year. For the city's working population, an extra annual funding of $30 million will be used to enhance the Labor Department's employment programs. That's to encourage employers to hire more seniors, youngsters, and the disabled. The Employee Retraining Board will also increase the quota for the Love Upgrading Special Scheme and increase the maximum amount of allowance of each eligible trainee. The Construction Industry Council will draw $200 million from its levy income to subsidize around 6,000 eligible small and medium-sized contractors and registered subcontractors. The CIC will also provide training allowances to underemployed in-service workers attending its training course. Kana Chu, TVB News.
Well, the 2021 land sale program comprises a total of 15 residential sites. Together with revitalization and railway development projects, more than 15,000 flats will be up for grabs. According to the latest forecast, the total public housing production in the next 5 years is about 100,000 units. As for private housing, around 20,000 units will be offered each year. Still ahead in tonight's news, 4 more confirmed cases of Welcome back to TVB News. 4 more coronavirus cases have been confirmed in Hong Kong, bringing the total in the city to 89. 2 of them are passengers of the Diamond Princess cruise ship, while another case is related to the Buddhist worship hall. For SAR residents stranded in virus-hit Wuhan, the government is planning to airlift them home soon. Jackie Lin with more.
2 more evacuees from the virus-stricken Diamond Princess ship contracted the novel coronavirus. The 21-year-old female patient had a fever while in Japan on February 12th. The symptoms subsided before her return to Hong Kong via the 3rd charter plane. So did her 16-year-old brother, who had a runny nose while aboard the vessel. But as HKU ran tests on their samples, they both tested positive. Another case involves the domestic helper of the 60-year-old jockey club member who contracted the virus earlier. 1 more patient is related to the infection cluster at the Buddhist worship hall at the North Point building. Earlier, his wife tested positive after visiting the temple. The health authority says so far there's no need to evacuate tenants from the premise.
The outbreak is confined to a place and also the close context of the confirmed case. For the Cheng-Yi case, that is different. We could not trace the transmission method.
For Hong Kong residents marooned in virus-hit Wuhan, Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Bureau says they will be brought home soon. Sources say the government flight could be chartered early next week. Those who wish to board the flight have to register by Friday 6 p.m. So far, the government received more than 1,700 related requests for help. They involve over 3,000 Hong Kongers across 37 cities in Hubei province. Among them, over 500 were in Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak. The government says returnees will have to undergo 14 days of mandatory quarantine. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Asian countries are slapping bans on travelers from coronavirus-hit areas in South Korea. Meanwhile, Italy has become a virus epicenter in Europe, with travelers from the country spreading the infection across borders. Leslie Tang has more.
South Korea has reported another drastic spike in coronavirus cases, sending the total soaring well past 1,000, with the death toll surpassing 10. A cluster of infections is linked to a religious sect branded as a cult in Daegu and a hospital in Cheon-do County. The county is just south of Daegu, and churchgoers allegedly visited an area in the hospital. Reports say almost all patients at the hospital's psychiatric ward have tested positive. The Philippines has now banned travelers from South Korea's virus-hit North Gyeongsang province. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe also announced foreigners who have traveled from Daegu or Cheon-do 2 weeks prior to arriving in Japan will be denied entry. Japan has the 3rd highest cases at more than 850, most of them from the Diamond Princess cruise ship. Abe has called for sports and cultural events to be scrapped or postponed for 2 weeks, raising questions about the Tokyo Olympics. The government has also called for more flexible office arrangements, including working from home. Meanwhile, Iran's deputy health minister has caught the virus. He looked visibly uncomfortable during a press conference in Tehran a day earlier. He later posted a video to confirm he had the virus and that he was quarantined at home. Over in Europe, Italy remains the hotspot for an outbreak in the continent. The majority of infections are concentrated in northern Italy, where towns are on virtual lockdown. Authorities have confirmed some 10 deaths and a spike of 100 cases in 1 day. Spain has confirmed its first cases, who had recently been to northern Italy. They involve a couple, and the hotel they were staying at in the Canary Islands has been quarantined. Austria also announced its first cases, who were from Italy's Lombardy region. And Croatia has also reported its first case, a man who traveled to Milan. Leslie Tang, TVB News.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is alerting Americans to begin preparing for the spread of coronavirus in the United States after infections surfaced in several more countries. The warnings come as the Trump administration signals the outbreak is under control in the U.S. Signaling a change of tone, the government's top disease fighters warned Americans to prepare for an outbreak.
Now, it's not so much a question of if this will happen anymore, but rather more a question of exactly when this will happen and how many people in this country will become infected.
Until now, the agency is largely focused on efforts to stop the virus from entering the country and quarantining individuals traveling from China. Officials insist risks to Americans remain low, but admit that assessment has the potential to change quickly.
We don't want people surprised if they see more cases here in the United States. That's an important part of transparency. People shouldn't panic when they see new cases.
Meanwhile, the White House's economic advisor says the administration has the response to the coronavirus under control.
This virus won't last forever. We have contained it. Look, I'm an old guy, been around a long time. I've seen these things come and go. Timing is impossible to know.
President Donald Trump is defending his administration's handling of the outbreak, even as the White House's request for $2.5 billion is being criticized as not being enough to handle the contagion.
As far as what we're doing with the new virus, I think that we're doing a great job.
United States.
The Senate's top Democrat says the White House has been caught flat-footed with no comprehensive plan to deal with the coronavirus.
We have a crisis, and the Trump administration is trying to build an airplane while already in mid-flight. This is towering and dangerous incompetence.
America's top diplomat, meanwhile, accused China of mishandling the epidemic through its censorship of media and medical professionals.
Expelling our journalists exposes once again the government's issue that led to SARS and now the coronavirus, namely censorship. It can have deadly consequences.
His remarks come after Beijing expelled 3 Wall Street Journal reporters earlier this week. Meanwhile, Donald Trump refused to speak out against a citizenship law pushed by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. At least 19 people were killed in violent clashes between supporters and opponents of the law during Trump's 2-day visit.